Personal reflection. There's something about a storm on the prairie that shows you what a person's made of. I've always believed that hospitality isn't about what you have to give, it's about whether you're willing to give it. My grandmother used to say that the measure of character comes when you're down to your last loaf and a stranger knocks. This story takes place in the hardscrabble Texas of 1883. When the land was unforgiving, and survival meant learning to read both the weather and the hearts of men. It's about a widow who had every reason to turn away, and a stranger who had every reason to keep walking. Sometimes the smallest act of mercy can change two lives forever. Martha's needle stopped mid-stitch. A man was stumbling up the road on foot, no horse, no wagon. Just boots dragging through dust like each step cost him. Sky was going purple-black to the west, the kind of color that made cattle nervous. She set her mending down and stood. The shotgun leaned inside by the door where it always did. Empty, but reassuring. Through the gap in her fence. She watched him reach the gate. He stopped there. Didn't open it, just stood swaying, hat already in his hands. "Ma'am." His voice was rough as creek gravel. "Storm's coming hard. Mind if I wait it out on your porch?" Thunder rolled, far off, but getting closer. Martha's hand went to the porch post. She was counting things, leather vest torn at the shoulder, no bedroll, hands empty, no horse behind him. A man who walked this far in August heat was either desperate or dangerous, maybe both. The first raindrops hit like bullets. "Where are you reading from today? If you've ever sheltered a stranger or been that stranger walking a long road, I'd love to hear about it in the comments below." Martha's eyes went to the mesquite gate between them. The latch was old leather, fraying. One good yank would snap it clean. He could be inside before she reached the shotgun propped just inside her door, empty. But he wouldn't know that. But he wasn't yanking. Wasn't even touching the latch. Lightning cracked overhead. White hot. The man flinched. In that flash, she saw his face weathered dark as saddle leather, lines carved deep around his eyes. Not young, not old. Somewhere in the hard middle. Her mouth opened. The Christian thing warred with the practical thing. Never turn away a soul in need. Never trust a man with empty hands. "Porch is there." She pointed to the other rocking chair. Not quite an invitation, more like permission. He lifted the latch slow. "Careful." Stepped through and turned back to secure it behind him, rawhide loop over the post. Snug. A man who respected fences. Something in Martha's chest loosened. He crossed the yard like he was walking on eggs. Each step deliberate. Didn't look at her straight. Just kept his eyes down. Respectful. Climbed the 2 steps. Set his hat on the porch rail, not on the floor where it would be in her way. She nodded toward the chair. He sat. Didn't rock. Just settled back and let out a breath that sounded like he'd been holding it for miles. Rain came all at once. No warning patter. A wall of water slamming the tin roof so hard Martha's teeth rattled. Thunder boomed close enough to feel in her ribs. The stranger had his eyes closed. Not sleeping, listening. His hands rested loose on the chair, arms broad across the knuckles, scarred on the backs. The nails were clean, though. Trimmed. Not a drifter's hands. Martha watched from the corner of her eye. He wasn't fidgeting, wasn't scanning the yard for things to steal, just sat like he'd been waiting his whole life for permission to stop moving. The rain built to a roar. Lightning turned everything silver white. She counted between flash and thunder 1, 2. Right on top of them. He didn't flinch this time. Didn't even open his eyes. Her hands found her mending again. Needle through flour sack. Pull. The rhythm steadied her breathing. The wind shifted, brought the smell of wet dust and something else underneath. Leather, sweat, and iron, like blood. She looked at him again. His vest was torn at the shoulder, stitching pulled loose, and there, just visible where his sleeve had ridden up a dark stain on the fabric. Too red for dirt. The stranger was gone when Martha woke. She sat up fast, heart hammering against her ribs. The quilt fell to her waist. Gray light filtered through the single window dawn. Maybe an hour passed. Outside, metal clanged against metal. Her bare feet hit the puncheon floor. She grabbed the shotgun from beside the door and pressed her back to the frame, peering out. The man was at her gate, shirtless. Sweat already darkening the waistband of his pants despite the morning cool. He had the whole thing off its hinges, laid flat in the dirt. Samuel's tools spread around him, hammer, saw, the rawhide scraps she'd kept meaning to throw away for 3 years. He was cutting new leather with her dead husband's knife. Martha's fingers went white around the shotgun barrel. The man had slept on her porch, accepted her shelter, and now he was taking liberties with things that weren't his to touch. She stepped onto the porch. The boards creaked. He didn't look up. Just kept working the blade through the leather. Hands steady. Morning sun caught the scars on his back, white lines. Old, crossing his shoulder blades like someone had dragged him through wire. "You got no call to be touching those tools." His hands stopped. He set the knife down slow, deliberate, turned to face her, still kneeling in the dirt. "Gate was poorly." His voice was rough from sleep. "Figured to fix it." "I didn't ask you to fix nothing." "No, ma'am." He picked up the rawhide strip, tested its strength between his fists. "But debt's a debt. Cornbread don't come free." Martha's jaw clenched. She wanted to argue he was a guest. She'd offered freely, expected nothing back. But the word stuck because the truth was simpler and harder than pride. That gate had been broken since Samuel died. 3 years of dragging it open, wedging it shut with rocks. 3 years of meaning to fix it, and never having the strength or the knowledge or the heart to try. She lowered the shotgun. "You hungry?" "I could eat. I'll put coffee on." She went inside before he could see her face doing things she didn't want it to do. The cook stove was already warm. He'd started the fire before dawn. Kindling crackled, flame licking at the bigger logs. The water bucket sat full by the door. Surface still rippling. He'd hauled fresh water, too. Martha's hands shook as she measured grounds into the pot. Twice used. Stretched thin. But it was all she had. She set it on the stove and stood watching steam curl from the spout. Not really seeing it. A man who started fires and hauled water before the household stirred wasn't a thief. Wasn't a drifter passing through. Was something else she didn't have a name for yet. The hammering started again outside. Steady. Rhythmic. She poured coffee into her 1 tin cup and carried it to the door. He had the gate upright, testing the swing. It opened smooth as butter, no scrape, no drag. Just a clean, silent arc. He stepped back, wiped his forehead with his arm, and nodded once like he was satisfied. Martha crossed the yard, held out the cup. "Much obliged, ma'am." He took it, drank deep, handed it back. She wrapped both hands around the warm metal where his mouth had just been, lifted it to her own lips. The coffee was bitter and weak, but it was hot, and somehow the fact that he'd drunk from it first made it easier to swallow. He was gathering Samuel's tools now, wiping each one with a rag before setting it careful on the porch, respecting them, treating them like they mattered. Gate's done. He reached for his shirt draped over the rail. Storm's past. I'll be moving on now. The shirt was stiff where the blood had dried. He pulled it on anyway, wincing when the fabric brushed his left arm. What happened there? Martha heard herself ask. He glanced at his sleeve. Barbed wire. Caught me fixing fence 2 days back. He worked the buttons. Looks worse than it is. Bled more than it should have. But it's clean. Martha nodded. Barbed wire could lay a man open if he wasn't careful. Samuel had scars from it too. The stranger she still didn't know his name started down the steps. She looked at the gate, hanging true and level for the first time in 3 years. Looked at the tools oiled and arranged on her porch like someone cared about them. Looked at the water bucket full, and the fire burning steady in her stove. He'd given her back something she thought was lost. Not just the gate. The feeling that came from waking up and finding something fixed instead of broken. The small dignity of a place that worked the way it should. Wait. He paused on the bottom step. One hand on the rail. Martha set the cup down. Her hands found each other at her waist, fingers twisting. Words were right there behind her teeth, but they wouldn't come out shaped right. Creek's up. She pointed west where the creek ran shallow and clear, barely ankle deep. Storm washed the ford out. You'd have to go 5 miles north to cross safe. His eyes flicked toward the creek, back to her. He knew she was lying. She knew he knew. The silence stretched between them like the space between lightning and thunder. I got fence needs mending, she said. Back 40. Wind pulled a 1/4 mile loose last month. I've been trying to knot it back with twine, but it won't hold come winter. She swallowed. I could pay you in meals, if you're willing to work for it. A crow called from the fence line. The new gate swung slightly in the breeze. Hinges whispering instead of screaming. Fair trade, he said finally. He set his hat back on the rail, picked up the hammer. Where's this fence at? Relief made her knees weak, but she didn't let it show. Just pointed toward the scrub mesquite and prickly pear where her property ended and the wild began, where wire hung in 3 places, rusted and sagging. I'll show you after breakfast. Yes, ma'am. He didn't smile. Neither did she. But something passed between them anyway, an understanding built on gates mended and coffee shared, and the fact that she'd just asked a stranger to stay, and he'd said yes without asking why. Martha turned toward the cabin, stopped with her hand on the doorframe. You got a name? Silas. I'm Martha Patterson. Pleased to make your acquaintance. Mrs. Patterson. She went inside to start the beans, leaving the door open behind her. Through the window she watched him walk toward the back 40, hammer over his shoulder, studying the fence line with eyes that knew land and wire and how things ought to be. Her hands found the bean pot, filled it with water from the bucket he'd hauled, set it on the fire he'd built. Outside. Silas knelt by the first break in the wire. His fingers moved along it, testing tension, finding weak points, not fumbling, not guessing, knowing. Martha watched those hands and remembered the scars on his back and the blood on his sleeve and the way he'd latched her gate behind him in the storm, like a man who understood that some boundaries were meant to be respected. Who was he really? And why did part of her hope he'd stay long enough for her to find out? 3 days turned into 4. Silas worked the fence line every morning, wire and hammer slung over his shoulder. Martha tended her garden pulling weeds, protecting tomatoes from the 3 scrawny chickens. The sun climbed and burned and fell. They found a pattern neither had to speak aloud. On the 4th morning, Martha woke to find Silas already gone from the porch. She stepped outside barefoot, shading her eyes against the early light. He was a dark figure against the eastern fence, kneeling in the grass, testing wire tension with his hands. She went back inside and started the fire he'd laid the night before. By the time coffee boiled, he was crossing the yard with his shirt already sweat dark between the shoulders. "Creek's still high," he said, not meeting her eyes. Martha looked past him toward the west. The creek glinted in the sun, running clear and shallow as ever. A child could wade it without getting their knees wet. "Reckon it is," she said. His jaw worked. He set the hammer down on the porch rail with care, like he was thinking hard about something. "That fence won't hold through winter, not the way it is now. Needs more than patchwork. Needs a full 1/4 mile restrung." He paused. "I could do it. If you're still of a mind to trade meals for work." "I'm of a mind." Something in his shoulders relaxed. "Much obliged, ma'am." That afternoon, Silas walked to town, came back leading 2 horses, a dappled mare and a rangy gelding. Both rented from the livery for $1 a week. The mare was for Martha, he said. Easier than walking when she needed to go to town for supplies. Martha ran her hand down the mare's neck. The horse turned and nuzzled her palm, warm breath against her skin. "I can't pay for, already paid. Consider it part of the arrangement." He tied both horses to the rail. "Partners share what's needed. You need a horse. Now you got one." Partners. The word sat strange in her mouth, but she didn't argue. The days developed rhythm. Silas rose before dawn, started the fire, hauled water. By the time Martha emerged, hair braided, face washed. Coffee was already black and bitter in the pot, and kindling was stacked by the door in a neat pyramid. She never thanked him. He never expected it. Just nodded and took his cup to the porch while she made cornmeal mush with the last scraping of molasses. They ate without talking much. After, he'd walk the fence line. She'd work the garden. At noon, she brought him water in a jar. He'd drink, hand it back, return to work. No words needed. Evenings they sat on the porch, rockers creaking, crickets starting up as the heat broke. The second evening, Martha told him about her father. Daddy rode out from Tennessee in '65. Right after the war ended, had Mama on a mule and the clothes on his back. Built this cabin board by board, cut every log himself. Took him near 2 years. Her hands were still in her lap. Cholera got him when I was 16. Mama was already gone by then. Childbirth. Year before. Baby came wrong. Silas whittled a stick down to nothing, shavings curling at his boots. I was alone, Martha continued. Church ladies came around with their casseroles and their notions about what I should do. Had a husband picked out for me, Henderson's oldest boy. He was 19 and had wandering hands. She stopped. I told them no. They said I was being prideful, that beggars can't choose. But you chose anyway. Met Samuel at a box social 3 months later. He worked at the mill. Quiet man. Listened more than he talked. We married that winter. I was 17. The whittling paused. How long were you married? 10 years. Then pneumonia took us February. Silas was quiet a long while. Then, I lost someone too. Not to sickness, to lies. Martha's rocking slowed. How's a person get lost to lies? Had a partner in the cattle business, man named Garrett. I trusted him with... He caught himself. With more than I should have. Gave him authority to handle things when I was away at stock sales. Came back and found he'd been telling folks I was unfit, dangerous. Tried to take everything. Did he succeed? In court, Gnome, other ways. The knife moved again. Precise cuts. Yeah, every person I thought was a friend believed him over me. Society ladies stopped receiving me. Men I'd done business with for years crossed the street to avoid me. He spat into the dirt. Won the case, but lost my stomach for the whole affair. So you left. So I left. They sat with that. Two people who'd learned the same bitter lesson in different classrooms, that the worst part of loss wasn't the losing. It was the empty chair after, by the 5th day, the space between their rockers had shrunk. Not much, maybe 6 inches, but enough that when they both rocked forward, Martha could smell lye soap on his shirt. Her lye soap. Because she'd washed his clothes with hers, and he'd let her without comment. The 6th evening. Silas came in for supper with a story. Found your neighbor's Jenny stuck in the creek bed today. Ornery creature refused every kind of assistance. Pushed from behind, she kicked. Pulled from front, she bit my hand clean through the glove. He shook his head. Finally just sat down in the water with her and waited. Martha ladled beans onto his plate. What happened? She got bored, walked out on her own after 2 hours, left me soaked through and no better off than when I started. The laugh came up from Martha's chest before she could stop it. Sharp and sudden, her hand flew to her mouth. Silas looked up, spoon halfway to his lips. Something gentle crossed his face. What? Just... Another laugh bubbled up. 2 hours, sitting in a creek, for a mule? That Jenny's got more stubbornness per pound than any creature I've ever met, he grinned. And I've met some stubborn creatures. Martha laughed harder. Her shoulders shook. Tears pricked her eyes, the good kind. The kind that came from breathing instead of drowning. When had she last laughed? She tried to count backward. 3 years. More. Samuel had been sick for months before he died. Before that, the silent years of hoping for babies that never came. She wiped her eyes. You got a gift for foolishness. Practice makes perfect. That night, Martha hummed while she mended. Didn't notice she was doing it until Silas said, "That's a pretty tune." Her hand stilled on the fabric. Mama used to sing it. When she was working, can't remember the words anymore. Don't need words. Tune's enough. She started humming again. Softer this time. Silas whittled. The night insects sang around them like they were all part of the same song. The 7th evening. Martha lifted Silas's shirt from the clothesline. The armpit seam had torn, she could see it clear in the fading light. She carried it to the porch, sat with her mending basket, and stitched it closed without asking permission. Silas saw her bent over his shirt in the lamplight. His face did something she couldn't quite read. Then he stood, crossed to the woodpile, and split enough kindling for 3 days. Stacked it neat and square by her door. Neither of them spoke about it. The next morning, the water bucket was full before she woke. That afternoon, his spare socks appeared in her mending basket, both with holes worn through the heels. She darned them while he straightened the lean on her chicken coop. They were learning each other like a language that didn't need words. Where he stepped careful, she made room. what she needed before she knew she needed it. He provided what he required without asking. She gave. On the 8th day, the space between their chairs was gone completely. Her armrest touched his. Neither moved away. Martha sat with her mending, needle flashing in and out of fabric. Beside her, Silas carved something from a piece of cedar, she couldn't tell what yet, but his hands moved with purpose. The sun was going down gold and heavy. Dust motes hung in the air like they were suspended in honey. Her tomatoes glowed red in the garden. The fence he'd mended ran straight and true to the horizon. 3 weeks ago, she'd been alone, scraping by, fixing things with twine and prayer, eating beans stretched thin with water, going to bed in silence and waking to silence and living in the long quiet between. Now there was coffee in the mornings, the sound of hammering, stories on the porch, laughter over stubborn mules. Now there was Silas. Martha glanced at him sideways. His profile was sharp against the sunset nose like a hawk, jaw set firm, eyes focused on his work. The evening light caught the silver threading his temples. Lines bracketed his mouth from years of sun and squinting. He wasn't young. Neither was she. They were both worn-down things, used hard and set aside. But maybe worn-down things could still be useful to each other. Silas, ma'am. You ever think about settling somewhere permanent? His hands stopped moving. The knife hovered over the cedar. Been thinking on it some, he said carefully. What stops you? He set the carving down, looked out at her land, her father's land at the cabin, and the garden, and the fence line running into the distance. Ain't found the right place yet. Martha's needle paused. What would make a place right? He turned to look at her then, direct. His eyes were dark and steady, and held something she couldn't name, but recognized anyway. Can't rightly say. Reckon I'd know it when I found it. Her heart did something strange against her ribs. She looked down at her mending, willing her hands to stay steady. Hoofbeats sounded on the road. They both turned. A buggy was coming up fast, black lacquer, fringe top, moving too quick for a social call. Martha's stomach dropped. The buggy pulled up to her gate. 2 men climbed down. One was fat through the middle, the other lean as a fence post. Both wore dark suits despite the heat. The fat one's boots gleamed with fresh polish. He opened her gate without asking. Didn't latch it behind him. Silas stood slow, the cedar carving forgotten. His hand found the hammer on the porch rail. The fat man smiled as he approached. His teeth were too white. Mrs. Patterson, name's Thornton. I've come to talk about your tax situation. Saturday morning, heat climbing before the sun cleared the horizon. Silas knelt on the porch step, fitting a new board where the old one had rotted through. Sweat already darkened his shirt between his shoulder blades. He'd stripped down to his undershirt, sleeves rolled past his elbows. The hammer rose and fell 3 strikes per nail. No wasted motion. Martha was inside, stirring beans that would have to last till Wednesday. The spoon scraped cast iron in steady circles. She was counting in her head 2 eggs yesterday, 1 this morning, none the day before. She'd need 4 to trade for cornmeal at the general store, maybe 5. The way prices kept climbing. Hoofbeats broke the quiet. The spoon stopped. Silas's hammer stopped. Through the window, Martha watched dust rise on the road. Not the mail wagon wrong day, not the preacher wrong buggy. This one was black lacquer with a fringed top, moving too fast for the ruts. Springs creaking under the weight. Her stomach clenched like a fist. The buggy rolled to a stop at her gate. 2 men climbed down while a third stayed up top holding the reins. The passengers wore suits, wool, dark. Too heavy for August in Texas. Celluloid collars gleamed white at their necks. The fat one had a gold watch chain stretched across his vest. The lean one's boots were polished till they caught the sun like mirrors. The fat one swung the gate open, left it hanging there. Unlatched, Martha's jaw locked. She untied her apron, folded it, set it on the table, smoothed her skirt with hands that wanted to shake but wouldn't, not where they could see, outside. Silas rose, hammer still gripped in his right hand. He didn't move off the porch, just stood there, positioning himself between the steps and the door, between them and Martha. She stepped outside. The fat man smiled. Teeth too white and even. "Mrs. Patterson, name's Thornton. Come to have a word about your property situation." She didn't invite him closer, didn't speak, just stood with her hands folded at her waist. Waiting. Thornton climbed the steps anyway. The lean one followed like a shadow. Up close they smelled of pomade and tobacco, and something else, something oily that made Martha's nose itch and her throat want to close. Silas shifted. 1 step left. Not blocking them yet, but ready to. The hammer hung loose at his side, casual as breathing. Thornton's eyes flicked to Silas. Dismissed him. Drifter. Hired help. Nothing. "Won't take but a minute of your time, ma'am." He pulled papers from inside his coat, unfolded them on the porch rail without asking permission. "The county assessor's made his rounds. Your land's been reassessed. Values have gone up considerable in the last year. That puts you in arrears on your taxes." Martha's throat had gone dry as summer grass. She couldn't make her tongue work. "How much?" Silas asked. His voice was flat, empty of everything except the question. Thornton glanced at him, back to Martha, like Silas had spoken out of turn. $47. Due end of August. 47. The number hit Martha like a fist to the sternum. She'd saved for 3 years, had $18 in the Arbuckle's coffee tin buried under the cornmeal sack. 18. She needed 29 more. Might as well need 1,000. Her hand found the porch post, gripped hard enough splinters bit into her palm. "Now, Mrs. Patterson." Thornton's voice went smooth as axle grease. "I'm not here to cause you distress. Quite the opposite. My associates and I have been acquiring land in this area. Railroads coming through. See? Lot of speculation about where the depot will land. Smart investors are buying now before prices climb even higher." He tapped the papers with 1 thick finger. "I'm prepared to offer you $200, cash money. Today, sign over your deed, clear your tax obligation, and still walk away with better than $150 in your pocket. That's more than most widows see in 5 years. 200. For 160 acres. For the land her father cleared with his own hands. For the cabin he built log by log. For the graves on the hill where he and Mama and Samuel rested under native stone. This is my home." Her voice came out hoarse, barely louder than the wind in the mesquite. "Ma'am, with all respect, this is 1 room and a patch of dirt." Thornton gestured at the cabin like it was an outhouse. "You've got no husband, no sons, no income to speak of, no way to raise $47 in 3 weeks. I'm offering you a clean exit, a chance to start fresh somewhere easier." The lean man spoke for the first time, voice like a saw blade. Railroad's progress. Mrs. Patterson. Can't stop progress. Better to sell now while the price is fair than lose it all at tax auction. Fair price. Silas's voice cut through quiet as a razor. 200 for 160 acres. That's $1.25 per acre. Land this close to town, with water and improvements, is worth $5 an acre. Minimum. Thornton's smile thinned like butter scraped too far. You some kind of land assessor. Boy, no sir, just a man who can cipher. The air on the porch went tight as fence wire. Thornton's face flushed red above his collar. The lean one's hand moved toward his coat just an inch, just a shift, but stopped when Silas's hammer twitched. Barely, just enough. Thornton cleared his throat, refolded his papers with hands that weren't quite steady. You think on my offer, Mrs. Patterson, but don't think too long. Tax sales August 15th, courthouse steps, 9 in the morning sharp. You show up without $47 cash. Your land goes to auction, and I'll be bidding. He tipped his hat, started down the steps, paused on the bottom one, and looked back. Oh, Mrs. Patterson. One more thing. August 15th falls on a Monday. Court opens at 9. Sometimes roads can be tricky that early. Wagons break down. Horses throw shoes. Would be a real shame if you got delayed somehow. If you missed the auction on account of circumstances. The threat hung there naked as bones. They climbed into the buggy. The driver snapped the reins. The rig rolled away. Leaving the gate swinging open behind them, Silas walked down the steps, closed the gate, latched it, stood there with his hand on the wood, looking down the empty road where dust still hung in the air like smoke. Martha's knees went soft. She sat in her rocker. Didn't rock. Just sat, staring at nothing. The chickens scratched in the dirt. A crow called from the fence line. Normal sounds. Everything normal except the paper Thornton had left on the rail. Corners lifting in the breeze. Silas came back up. Set the hammer down gentle as laying down a baby. Sat on the step below Martha's chair. Waited. The silence stretched like leather, soaked and dried too many times. Martha's hands twisted in her skirt. The fabric bunched between her fingers. I got $18. Her voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. Someone far away. In a coffee tin, been saving 3 years, every egg I could spare, every bit of mending work the church ladies would pay me for. Took me 3 years to save $18. Silas didn't move, didn't speak. Samuel, my husband, he took a loan before he died. From First National Bank, $65 for seed and equipment. I've been paying the interest, $2 a month. Thought I had time to work down the principal. Thought. Her voice cracked. She pressed her hand over her mouth. Breathed through her nose until she could speak again. 47 for the taxes, 65 for the note. That's $112 total. She laughed. It came out broken, jagged. I got 18. I'm 94 short. Silas picked up a wood shaving from the step, rolled it between his fingers. It crumbled to dust. This Thornton. His voice was quiet, careful. He come around often, making offers before tax sales. I don't know. I don't keep up with town matters. Don't have time for gossip. She looked at her hands. They were shaking now. She couldn't stop them. What am I going to do? The question hung there. She hadn't meant to ask it out loud. Hadn't meant to sound so small, so broken. Silas stood, walked to the porch rail, picked up the tax notice Thornton had left, read it slow. lips moving slightly. Set it down. His hands were shaking, but Martha saw. "This ain't about taxes," he said. "This is about land. They raised your assessment to force you out. Probably done it to others too. Small holders, folks who can't fight back. But why? This ain't prime land. Creek barely runs year-round. Soil's thin. Don't matter what it's worth now. Matters what they can make people believe it'll be worth. Railroad speculation. Even if there ain't no railroad coming. The rumor's enough. Buy cheap. Sell high to fools who believe the story. Or hold it. Wait." He turned to face her. "How many others you know lost land to tax sales this year?" Martha counted in her head. 4. Widow Johnson, south of here. The Hendricks family. Old man Sawyer, who had the place by the creek ford. And that family from Mexico can't recall their name. All small holders, all folks who couldn't pay when assessments jumped. Yes, I suppose so." Silas nodded once, sharp, like a piece of a puzzle had clicked into place. "You can fight this. Appeal the assessment. Bring it before the county board. Prove they inflated the value unfair. That takes a lawyer, money for filing fees, time." Martha's voice was dust and ashes. "I got 3 weeks and $18. The silence came back. Heavier this time, pressing down like the August heat. Silas walked to the edge of the porch, looked out at her land, the garden, the fence line he'd mended, the mesquite trees marking where her property ended and the rest of the world began. His shoulders were rigid, hands in fists at his sides like he was fighting something inside himself. "Silas." He didn't turn. "If you need to move on, I understand. This ain't your trouble. You don't owe me nothing. I ain't leaving." He said it hard, loud, then softer. "I ain't leaving. You don't have to. I can help." He spun to face her. "If you'll let me, I can." He stopped. His jaw worked like he was chewing words too big to swallow. Martha stood, crossed to the rail. "You can what? I know people with money, lawyers. I could—" He looked away. "I could ask for help, on your behalf. I can't take charity. It ain't charity, it's—" He stopped again, fists clenching and unclenching. "It's what neighbors do, what decent folks do." Martha studied his face, saw the war happening behind his eyes, the thing he wasn't saying, the secret he was holding back with both hands. "What ain't you telling me?" Her voice was quiet, steady. "You ain't no drifter. I've known that since you fixed the gate. The way you work measuring twice, cutting once, way you know cattle and land and business, way you talk when you forget to talk, simple." His throat worked. "I'm a man trying to remember what decent looks like. That ain't an answer. It's the only one I got right now." They stood 2 feet apart. Might as well be a canyon. The tax notice fluttered on the rail, lifted in a gust, tumbled to the porch floor, skittered across the boards, fell into the yard. Martha watched it blow against the closed gate, watched the chickens peck at it. Indifferent. The number 47 was visible in bold print, mocking her. 3 weeks, $18, a stranger who wouldn't say who he really was. And a pit opening in her stomach that said everything was about to change whether she wanted it to or not. That night, Martha couldn't sleep. She lay on the rope bed, staring at ceiling beams she could barely see in the dark. Outside, Silas's breathing was even and steady. He'd settled on the porch, same as always, like nothing had changed. Everything had changed. The moon climbed, Silver light cut through the window, made a sharp line across the floor. Martha watched it move, inch by slow inch. Time passing the way it always did, indifferent, relentless, uncaring whether you were ready or not. 3 weeks. She sat up. The quilt pooled around her waist. Her shift stuck to her back despite the night cool. She pressed her palm flat against her breastbone, where her heart hammered like it was trying to break out. The floor was cool under her bare feet. She crossed to the door, eased it open. Hinges didn't squeak. Silas had oiled them. He was sitting up, back against the wall, knees drawn to his chest. Not sleeping, just sitting in the dark. "Can't sleep neither," he said without turning his head. Martha stepped onto the porch. The boards were still warm from the day's baking heat. She sat in her rocker. Didn't rock. The moon was near full bright enough to read by if you had young eyes. Silas shifted, pulled his knees tighter. The silence stretched, comfortable and uncomfortable at the same time. A coyote yipped somewhere west. Another answered. Then quiet again. "Daddy died when I was 16. Martha's voice came out rough. She cleared her throat. Started over. "Cholera, summer of 1866. Mama was already gone by then, childbirth the year before. Baby came out wrong, too early, too small. Preacher said it was a boy, but I never saw him. They buried them together." Silas's silhouette didn't move. "I was alone in this cabin. 16 years old. Couldn't read much. Couldn't cipher beyond basic sums. Just knew how to keep a garden and mend clothes and pray." She folded her hands in her lap. "Church ladies descended like crows after a kill. Brought casseroles and advice. Told me I needed a husband. That a girl alone would come to ruin. They had one picked out already, Henderson's oldest boy. 19 years old, with hands that grabbed and eyes that wouldn't stay where they belonged. You told them no. I did. They said I was being foolish, prideful, that beggars can't be choosers." Her jaw tightened. "Met Samuel 3 months later at a box social. He bid $2 for my basket, more than it was worth. We sat under a cottonwood tree, and he didn't talk much, but when he did, he listened first. We were married by Christmas. I was 17. The moon climbed higher. Shadows shifted across the yard. We tried for babies. 10 years. Every month I'd count days and hope. Every month. Her throat closed. She swallowed hard. "Nothing. The church ladies had opinions about that too. Said maybe I wasn't praying hard enough. Maybe I had unconfessed sin. Maybe if I was more submissive, more faithful, more—" She stopped. "More everything I wasn't." "Stop." Silas's voice cut through. Not loud, firm as stone. "Stop repeating their poison." Martha's breath hitched. She wiped her face. Her cheeks were wet, and she hadn't noticed when that started. "Samuel got sick 3 years back. February, cough that wouldn't quit. By March, he couldn't rise from bed. I tried everything, onion poultices, mustard plasters, every remedy the women brought. Prayed till my knees went numb." Her voice shook. "He died on a Sunday morning. I was holding his hand. He was breathing, and then he wasn't. Simple as that. 1 second he was there. Next second gone." Silas stood. Crossed to her rocker. Sat on the porch floor beside it. Close enough she could feel warmth from his shoulder. "I buried him next to Mama and Daddy. Preacher said words I don't remember. Church ladies brought more casseroles. After a week they stopped coming. After a month they stopped asking how I was faring." She looked down at her hands. pale in the moonlight. 3 years I've been alone, and now I'm fixing to lose the only thing I got left. The land Daddy cleared, the cabin he built, the graves, all of it. Silas's hand found hers on the arm of the rocker, covered it. His palm was rough, warm, real. "You ain't alone no more," he said. Martha's chest hitched. She turned her hand over, laced her fingers through his, held on. They sat like that. Her in the rocker, him on the floor, hands joined in the dark. The moon poured silver over everything. Coyotes sang their lonesome song. After a long while, Silas spoke. "I built a cattle operation from nothing. Started with 50 head on borrowed land when I was 22. Worked every waking hour for 15 years, slept in line shacks, ate beans and hardtack till I couldn't stand the sight of either. Saved every dollar. Bought land acre by acre. More cattle, hired good men. Built it up to 3,000 head across 2 sections." Martha listened. His voice was different now, the rough edges smoothed out, educated words coming easier. "Took on a partner when the operation got too big for one man, fellow named Garrett, sharp with numbers, knew banking and contracts. We shook hands on it. I gave him power of attorney so he could handle business when I was away at stock sales." He paused. His thumb moved across her knuckles, back and forth. "Went to Fort Worth for a fortnight, maybe 3 weeks. Came back and found he'd filed papers with the territorial court saying I was mentally unfit, claiming I was dangerous, unstable, trying to take the whole operation for himself. What did you do? Hired lawyers, best ones I could find. Fought him in court for 6 months, cost me near everything I'd saved. But I won, kept my land, kept my cattle. Judge ruled in my favor, clear and final. Then what's the problem?" His jaw worked in the moonlight. "Problem is, I won in court but lost everywhere else. Society ladies in Fort Worth, the ones who used to invite me to dinners and dances when they thought I was respectable, they believed Garrett's story. Wouldn't receive me anymore. Men I'd done business with for 10 years crossed the street when they saw me coming. Banker who'd backed my first land purchase suddenly couldn't approve new credit lines. I was—" He stopped. Started again. "I was a ghost in my own town, the mad rancher, the dangerous one everyone whispered about but nobody would talk to direct." Martha's thumb traced circles on the back of his hand. He rubbed the back of his neck with his free hand. "Rustlers hit the ranch twice in those early years. Second time they caught me alone, dragged me through barbed wire to teach me a lesson about protecting what's mine." His voice went flat. "Learned it, too. Never lost another head after that." Martha remembered the scars on his back. White lines crossing his shoulder blades. Now they made sense. "I won my case, kept everything I'd built, but I couldn't stay. Every morning I'd ride past folks who'd believed the lies. Every Sunday I'd sit in church and feel eyes on my back, hear the whispers." He pulled his hand free, rubbed his face. "So I left. Told my foreman to run things. Said I'd check in by telegraph. And I rode out looking for proof." "Proof of what?" He turned to look at her. Moonlight caught his eyes. Made them silver. Proof that decent people still existed. That kindness wasn't just something folks performed when they wanted something back. That I wasn't wrong for believing in it after everything Garrett did. Martha's chest went tight. "You were testing me." "Yeah, the whole time. The gate, the fence, the cornbread I gave you. You were watching to see if I was what real—" "Yeah." He didn't look away. Didn't make excuses. Just sat there letting her see it plain. "You let me struggle. Let me worry about $18 and saving my mama's ring to sell. You could have helped any time, but you just watched. I know. You know. She laughed. It sounded broken even to her own ears. That makes it all right then, you knowing. No, it don't make it right. Nothing makes it right. His throat worked. I used you, used your kindness to prove something to myself. That's unforgivable. Martha stood. Walked to the porch rail, gripped it hard enough her knuckles went white. Behind her. Silas stayed on the floor. Waiting. Why? She asked the darkness. Why'd you do it? Because Garrett broke something in me, made me doubt everything, every smile, every kind word, every person who claimed they cared. I started thinking everyone was lying. Everyone wanted something. He stood. She heard his boots on the boards. I needed to know if one person, just one, could be good without knowing what they'd get in return, without knowing I had money to pay them back. And am I? She didn't turn around. Am I good enough for your test? You're the best person I've ever known. The words hung there between them and the night. Martha turned, looked at him across the 6 feet of porch. You ain't no drifter. I've known that since the second day. Way you fix that gate measured twice. Cut once. Way you walk fence lines checking tension. Way you know cattle and land and business. Way you talk when you forget to be careful with your words. His eyes closed. Martha, I don't care who you are, she said, voice steady now. Strong. I care who you been here, with me. The man who fixed my gate. Who made me laugh about a stubborn Jenny, who sits on this porch and don't need to fill silence with empty words. If I help you, if I pay that debt, everything changes. You'll be grateful. Beholden. What we got here, this... He gestured between them. It'll rot. You'll wonder if I stayed because I cared or because I pitied you. Then tell me straight. Why do you want to help? His hands fisted at his sides. Because you shared your last cornbread with a stranger. Didn't ask my name. Didn't ask what I could do for you. Just gave it. He took a step closer. That's what I came looking for. That's the proof I needed. And now I can't. He stopped. Can't what? Can't watch you break yourself for pride when I got the means to stop it. Martha crossed to stand in front of him. Close enough to smell sweat and soap and the cedar he'd been carving. I got secrets too. Things I ain't told you. We all got things we keep back. Not like this. How do you know? She lifted her chin. You think poverty ain't a secret? You think being barren ain't something I hide? You think I ain't ashamed every Sunday when the church ladies talk about their grandchildren and I got nothing to say back? His face crumpled. I didn't mean... I know what you meant. I know you got money somewhere. Property. A whole life you ain't mentioned. I ain't stupid. Silas. She held his gaze. But I also know you've been here near 2 weeks. You could have left any time. Could have kept riding when that storm passed. But you stayed. You fixed my gate and mended my fence and made me laugh and sat on this porch like you belonged here. I don't belong. Maybe you do. Maybe that's what scares you. The words landed between them like a stone in still water. Silas's throat worked. He looked away. If I pay your taxes, the bank note, all of it, will you let me stay, keep working this land, keep sitting on this porch? Why would you want to? Because... His voice roughened. Because for the first time in 2 years, I don't feel like the world's rotten clear through. Don't feel like I'm wrong about everything. Don't feel... He met her eyes. Don't feel alone. Martha's breath caught. The moon slipped behind a cloud. Darkness dropped over them complete. In it she could hear his breathing. could feel the space between them charged with everything unsaid. Light returned as the cloud passed. "Yeah," she said. His shoulders dropped. "But I got conditions." He went still. "What conditions?" "You tell me your whole name, your real one, and where you come from. Not tonight, not tomorrow, but soon." She stepped back. "I don't like secrets between people who sit on porches together." "Fair enough. And one more thing. Yeah, you pay my debt. We're partners, not charity, partners, 50-50 in whatever we build here, even split." His eyebrows rose. "You don't even know what I'm proposing." "Don't care. We're partners, or we're nothing, equal, your money for my land and my knowledge of it. Even trade." A smile broke across his face. Small, but real. "You drive a hard bargain, ma'am." "Learned from Daddy. He could outtrade a horse thief." Silas laughed. Quiet. Genuine. Martha turned toward the door, stopped with her hand on the frame. "Thank you for staying. Thank you for the cornbread." She went inside, closed the door, leaned against it with her palm pressed flat to the wood. On the other side, she heard him settle back down, heard his bedroll rustle, heard his breathing even out. But he wasn't sleeping. She could tell. Same way she knew when rain was coming, or when the chickens were about to lay. Martha crossed to her bed, lay down, pulled the quilt up. Her hand still tingled where he'd held it. Her chest still felt full where his words had settled. And in the back of her mind, one question turned over and over. Who was Silas really? And what would happen when she found out? The buggy came back the next Saturday, high noon when the heat was worst. Martha was in the garden on her knees, pulling weeds from around the tomato plants. Her skirt was hiked up and tucked into her waistband to keep the hem out of the dirt. Sweat ran down her spine, soaked through the back of her shift. The sun pressed down like a hand trying to shove her into the earth. She heard hoofbeats and looked up, squinting. The black buggy, same as before. But this time 3 men climbed down Thornton. The lean one. And a 3rd man wearing a tin star on his vest that caught the light like a mirror. Sheriff. Martha's hands stopped moving. A tomato plant came loose in her grip, roots trailing dirt. She set it down careful, wiped her palms on her skirt, but the mud just smeared. She stood, knees caked with earth, dark crescents under every fingernail. Her hair had come loose from its braid, stuck to her neck in sweaty strands. She looked down at herself, and her face went hot. This is how they'd see her. On her knees? Filthy. Exactly what Thornton already thought she was, poor trash clinging to land she couldn't afford. Silas appeared from behind the cabin where he'd been checking the north fence. Hammer in one hand, wire cutters in the other. He took in the scene buggy. 3 men. Martha standing in the garden with mud on her knees, and his jaw went tight as fence wire. He crossed the yard in long strides, stopped between Martha and the gate, didn't look at her, kept his eyes on the men. Thornton smiled. Same oily smile. "Mrs. Patterson, Sheriff Carson wanted a word. Official business." The sheriff climbed down last. He was old past 60, with a gray mustache and a belly that hung soft over his belt. He'd been sheriff when Martha's daddy homesteaded this land, had come to Sunday dinners back then, had bounced 6-year-old Martha on his knee and called her Marthy girl. He wouldn't look at her now. looked at her shoulder instead. "Ma'am," he tipped his hat. "Got papers need your signature. Tax lien notice, official—" "What papers?" Her voice came out thin. He pulled a document from inside his coat, held it out folded. "Says here you're in arrears $47 on property taxes. This is acknowledgement you received notice. If you can't pay by August 15th, property goes to auction. Need your mark here." Martha climbed out of the garden. Each step felt like wading through creek mud. Her skirt fell back down, hem dragging dirt. She crossed to the gate, aware of every eye on her, on the mud caked to her knees, on the sweat stains dark under her arms, on her wild hair and dirty hands. Up close, the sheriff looked older, tired. Lines carved deep around his mouth like they'd been there so long they'd worn grooves in the bone. "You knew my daddy," Martha said. The sheriff's hand trembled, just slightly. "I did. He homesteaded this land legal, proved it up, got the deed from the Territorial Land Office." "I know it. Then you know this ain't right. You know what they're doing." His jaw worked. "Ain't about right, ma'am. Law says taxes got to be paid. Assessment's been made legal. You got 3 weeks to settle or the land goes to auction. To him," she pointed at Thornton, "to the man whose brother-in-law raised my taxes to force me out." "Ma'am." The sheriff's face flushed red. "I'm just doing my job." "Your job is stealing from widows." Thornton stepped forward. "Now, Mrs. Patterson, there's no call for inflammatory language. Sheriff Carson is enforcing duly enacted tax code. You've been given fair notice, more than fair. I'm even here with a final offer. $150. Cash, today. Sign the deed over. Walk away with money in your pocket instead of nothing." $150. He'd dropped it again. $50 less than before. Punishment for refusing. For having the audacity to say no to him. Martha looked at the paper in the sheriff's hand, at Thornton's smile, at the lean man standing behind him with one hand resting in his coat pocket where something made a bulge, at Silas gripping his tools so hard his knuckles had gone bone white. "No." Her voice came out steady, stronger than she felt. "This is my land. My daddy's land. I ain't signing nothing." Thornton's smile went thin as a knife blade. "Ma'am, you're making this considerably more difficult than necessary. You have no income, no means to raise $47 in 3 weeks. You're going to lose this property regardless. Why not accept what's offered and maintain some dignity?" Dignity. The word hit like a slap. Martha looked down at herself again. Mud to her knees, dirt under her nails, sweat stains, hair like a bird's nest. She could smell herself, earth and sweat, and the sour tang of fear. This is what dignity looked like when you had nothing left to trade but your pride. Her face burned. "I'll find a way," she said. "How?" Thornton's voice went soft, mocking. "Sell your garden. Those 3 scrawny chickens, that broken-down mare you borrowed, you have nothing. Mrs. Patterson, nothing but stubborn pride. And pride doesn't pay taxes." The sheriff cleared his throat. "Ma'am, you need to sign this paper. Just says you received official notice. That's all. If you refuse, I have to bring you before Judge Thompson. Make it official that way. And if I don't sign, then I escort you to the courthouse, today. Make you stand before the judge and acknowledge receipt in front of witnesses. Stand in court, in front of the whole town. Let everyone see how far she'd fallen. 3 years of scraping by, and this is what it came to being dragged before a judge like a criminal because she couldn't pay $47. Her hand shook, as she took the paper. The words blurred. She couldn't read most of them anyway. Samuel had been the one who could read contracts and legal papers. She could make out her name. Martha Patterson. And the signature line. "Don't sign nothing till you read it careful," Silas said. His voice was tight, controlled. Thornton's eyes flicked to him. "This doesn't concern you, boy. I'm making it concern me." The lean man's hand shifted in his pocket. The sheriff's hand moved to his belt, close to where a gun would hang. The air went tight. "You her lawyer?" Thornton asked. "No, sir." "Her kin?" "No, sir." "Then this is between Mrs. Patterson and the county. You'd be wise to remember your place." Silas didn't move, just stood there blocking the gate, tools in hand. The sheriff sighed like he was carrying something too heavy. "Ma'am, please, don't make this harder than it needs to be. Just sign. Acknowledge you got the notice. That's all I'm asking." Martha looked at Silas. His face was a mask, jaw tight, eyes hard, but underneath she could see the war happening. The thing he wasn't saying. The help he wanted to give but couldn't without destroying what they'd built. She looked back at the sheriff, at the man who'd known her since she was 6, who'd eaten at her table, who wouldn't meet her eyes now because shame made people look away, and she was the one who should be ashamed. Wasn't she standing here filthy and poor and desperate? She took the pencil he offered, signed her name. The letters looked childish, shaky, like she'd forgotten how to write. The sheriff folded the paper, put it back in his coat. "I'm sorry, Martha," using her first name. Like that made it better, like pity washed away the stain of what he'd just done. "Don't apologize," she said. "Just leave." They climbed into the buggy. Thornton paused with one boot on the step. 3 weeks, Mrs. Patterson, courthouse steps, 9 in the morning sharp. Be there with $47 cash. Or, he smiled, "Well, I expect you know what happens." The buggy rolled away. Dust rose and settled. The chickens went back to scratching. The world went back to normal. Except nothing was normal. Martha stood at the gate, gripping it for balance. Her whole body shook, not just her hands now, everything. Silas set his tools down. "Martha, don't." She held up one hand. "Just don't." She walked to the cabin, went inside, closed the door, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at her hands. Mud-caked, nail-broken. Poor woman's hands. Worthless hands that couldn't hold on to anything that mattered. She'd stood there in front of them filthy, on her knees in the dirt when they arrived. Looking exactly like what Thornton said she was nothing. Nobody. A widow with no options and no future. Too stubborn to accept reality. The shame was alive in her chest, hot and choking. It had claws. She pulled off her muddy skirt, her shift, stood in her underclothes and saw herself like they'd seen her, thin, worn out. 30 years old and nothing to show for it but calluses and scars and a piece of land 3 weeks from being torn away. The tin basin sat in the corner. She poured water from the pitcher cold, because she hadn't heated any, and washed her hands. The water turned brown. She scrubbed harder. Her face, her neck, her arms. Scrubbed until her skin hurt, but the shame wouldn't wash off. A knock at the door. "Martha." She didn't answer. "I'm coming in." The door opened. Silas stood in the frame, saw her standing there in her underclothes, hair down, face red from scrubbing. He turned his back immediately. "Sorry, I needed to know you're—" He stopped. "You all right?" "No." Silence. "I can fix this," he said to the wall. "I have the money, lawyers, I can fight Thornton. Make this right. I know. Then why won't you let me? Martha pulled on a clean shift. Tied it. Because if you do, I'll owe you. And I can't. Her voice cracked. I can't owe anyone else. Can't be saved like some helpless thing that can't take care of itself. You ain't helpless. You see me out there on my knees covered in mud. The shame flared hot again. That's what they saw. What you saw. Poor Martha, who can't even keep herself decent. That ain't what I saw. Then what did you see? He turned, looked at her straight. I saw a woman working her land, growing food with her own hands. Surviving, that's strength, not shame. Martha's laugh came out broken. I got 3 weeks and $18. Gonna sell my mama's wedding ring Monday for whatever I can get. That ain't strength, that's desperation. Silas went still. You're selling your mama's ring. It's just metal. She'd understand. Martha pulled open the drawer where she kept it. The handkerchief was there, tatted lace her mama had made by hand. She unfolded it. The ring sat in the center. Plain gold band. Thin from years of wear. The only thing left of her mother. Martha wrapped it back up, tucked it in her pocket. Silas watched. His face had gone strange. Hard and old, and something else she couldn't name. Don't, he said. Ain't your choice. Martha. It might bring $20. Maybe. If the pawnbroker's feeling generous. She looked at him. That's 20 I don't got. Every dollar matters now. You'll still be short. I know. Then what's the point? The point. Her voice cracked. The point is, I tried. When they take my land, I can say I gave everything. Sold the last piece of my mama I had left. I didn't just quit. Silas's throat worked. He turned to the window, stood staring out at nothing. I can't watch you do this, he said. Can't watch you break yourself for what pride that's all I got left. You got me. The words hung there, simple and impossible. Martha sank onto the bed, put her head in her hands. Outside a crow called. The wind picked up, rattled something loose on the porch. Normal sounds while her whole world crumbled. I can't lose this land, she whispered. Can't lose my folks' graves. Can't lose the only place I ever belonged. Silas crossed to her, knelt on the floor in front of her, putting himself lower, meeting her where she was, down in the dirt of it. Then let me help. Not as charity. As partners. I pay the debt. We combine the land. Build something together. 50-50. Equal. Martha looked at him. At his weathered face and dark eyes and hands that knew how to fix broken things. I don't even know your whole name. Don't matter. It does. Because I don't know if you're... She stopped. If you're worth risking what little I got left. His hand found hers, held tight. You gave me your last cornbread. You're worth everything. Martha's throat closed. Tears came hot, and she couldn't stop them. Silas waited, patient, steady. Finally she nodded. Once, couldn't speak. He stood, helped her up. Kept holding her hand. I need to ride to town Monday. Send telegrams. Talk to a lawyer. Can you wait here? Trust me. The ring. Keep it. You ain't selling nothing. Martha pulled the handkerchief from her pocket. Unfolded it. The ring gleamed dull gold. She looked at it. At the last piece of her mother. At the life before this life. Then at Silas. This stranger who'd become something she didn't have words for. All right, she whispered. He smiled. Small. Real. Thank you. Before he left that morning, he'd said only, I'll telegraph ahead. Arrange things so I'm not gone more than a few days." She'd nodded, not understanding then what "arrange things" meant, not knowing he was planning to sell an empire. He rode toward town, toward whatever truth he'd been hiding. And Martha was left alone with the ring and the silence and one question: who was Silas really? And when she found out, would she wish she'd never asked? The 12-mile ride to the county seat had taken 3 hours in the August heat. Now Martha stood at the bottom of the limestone courthouse steps. Hot enough she could feel the burn through her boot soles. Her best dress, black wool from 3 years of mourning Samuel, was too heavy for the season. Sweat ran down her spine. The collar scratched her neck. Silas had wanted to come. She'd told him this was hers to face, told him she needed to stand on her own 2 feet for this. At least, now, standing here with 20 people watching. She wondered if pride was just another word for foolishness. The crowd gathered on the courthouse lawn, mostly men. Some she recognized from town: Mr. Holloway, who ran the general store; the blacksmith whose name she couldn't recall; a banker in a pressed suit. Others were strangers. Land speculators. Probably come to pick over what was left of her life. Thornton stood on the top step beside the county clerk, who was doubling as auctioneer today. Thornton caught Martha's eye, smiled, tipped his hat like they were meeting at church social instead of her execution. The clerk unrolled a paper, cleared his throat. His voice carried thin and reedy across the crowd. "Patterson property? 160 acres. Improvements include 1-room cabin, functional well, established fencing, garden plot under cultivation, tax debt of $47 outstanding. Do I hear an opening bid?" Martha's chest was too tight. The stays of her corset cut into her ribs with each breath. She locked her knees to keep from swaying. $50. Thornton's voice rang clear as a bell. 50. For land worth 10 times that. For her father's sweat. For Samuel's grave. "I have 50. Do I hear? I'm here on behalf of Mrs. Patterson." The crowd turned. Martha turned. Silas. But not Silas. Not the man who'd slept on her porch and mended her fence and split her kindling. This man wore a suit dark wool, 3 pieces, pressed sharp as a knife edge. Watch chain gleamed gold across his vest. Boots polished to a mirror shine. Hat brushed. Brim perfect. His face was clean-shaved, hair trimmed neat. Even his collar was white as sun-bleached bone. He walked up the center path between spectators. Didn't shuffle. Didn't keep his eyes down. Moved like he owned the ground under his feet and the air above it. Shoulders back, chin up. A man used to doors opening when he arrived. Martha's hands went numb. He climbed the steps, stopped in front of the clerk, pulled bills from inside his coat, counted them out, calm and deliberate, like he had all the time in the world. $65, 47 to clear the tax arrears, 18 to satisfy the outstanding note at First National Bank. He set the money in the clerk's hand. Mrs. Patterson's debts are paid in full. Auctions void. The clerk took the bills, counted them twice with fingers that trembled slightly, looked at Thornton, back at Silas. "Sir, the auction's already been called to order. I can't just check your statute book, section 42, paragraph 6. If debt's settled before the gavel falls, the sale is void." Silas's voice was different too, educated, each word precise and clear. "I can wait while you verify." Take your time. The clerk's Adam's apple bobbed. He looked down at the money in his hand like it might bite him. He's right. Debt paid before gavel means no sale. He looked at Thornton. I'm sorry, Mr. Thornton, the property's clear. Thornton's face went from pink to red to purple in the span of 3 heartbeats. Now you wait just a minute, who the hell are you? Silas reached into his vest, pulled out a card. Heavy cream stock, engraved, handed it to Thornton. Thornton read it. The color drained from his face like someone had pulled a plug. His hand started shaking so bad the card rattled. What's it say? Someone in the crowd called. Thornton couldn't speak, just stood there staring at the card in his trembling hand. Silas took it back, held it up so the crowd could see, even if they couldn't read it. Silas Blackwood, Blackwood Cattle Company, Fort Worth. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Martha heard the name repeated, whispered. Blackwood, the cattle baron, the one who'd fought off rustlers single-handed, who'd driven 5,000 head to Kansas railhead, who owned half the stockyards in Fort Worth. Her vision tunneled, edges going dark. She locked her knees harder. Now, Mr. Thornton. Silas's voice stayed quiet, conversational. Cut through the murmuring like a blade through butter. I've spent the last 3 days in Fort Worth, productive days. Sent some telegrams to the territorial governor, state land office, had interesting conversations with some legal associates of mine. Thornton found his voice. You have no right to interfere. About tax assessments in this county, how they've increased substantially in the past year, how certain properties, particularly small holdings owned by widows and elderly folks, got reassessed at values 2-3 times higher than comparable land, while other properties, say, ones held by certain bank officers and their relatives, stayed flat or even decreased. The crowd noise changed, got sharper, more interested. You're making serious accusations. I'm stating facts. Facts my lawyers are very good at documenting. Subpoenas, court orders, financial records going back 5 years. Silas stepped closer. And here's another interesting fact. Every one of those reassessed properties that went to tax auction in the past year, the winning bidder was connected to First National Bank. Brother-in-law, cousin, business partner. Curious pattern. The banker in the crowd shifted on his feet, suddenly very interested in his own boots. You have no proof. I have excellent lawyers. They're preparing a case for the territorial court right now. Public trial. Every assessment questioned. Every auction scrutinized. Every connection between your family and the bank laid out in open court. Silas smiled. No warmth in it. I don't mind spending money on principle. Mr. Thornton, I've got more than enough. Question is, how much are you willing to spend defending yourself? Thornton's mouth opened, closed, opened again. No sound came out. His hat crumpled in his fist like he was strangling it. Thought so. Silas turned to the clerk. Mrs. Patterson's property is clear. You'll file the appropriate documentation. Yes, sir. Right away, sir. Good. Silas descended the steps, stopped in front of Martha, offered his arm. Ma'am. Martha stared at him. At this stranger in a suit. This man who spoke like he owned the world because he probably did own half of it. This person she didn't recognize, even though she'd sat beside him for 2 weeks on a porch and thought she was learning who he was. Her arm wouldn't move. Couldn't. She stood frozen while the whole town watched. Something behind his eyes, fear, pain. Something vulnerable under all that polish. "Martha." She turned, walked down the steps, away from him, away from the courthouse, away from the whispers starting up behind her like a nest of wasps stirred with a stick. Her boots hit dirt. She kept walking. The black dress trapped heat against her skin till she could barely breathe. Her vision swam, but she kept moving because if she stopped, she'd fall down right here in front of everyone. Footsteps behind her. "Martha, wait." She spun. "Don't." He stopped 10 feet back, arms at his sides. The whole crowd was watching from the courthouse steps. Thornton, the clerk, the banker, the strangers, 20 witnesses to whatever happened next. "We need to talk," Silas said. "You lied to me." "No, ma'am." "You let me think." Her voice cracked. "You let me believe you were just a drifter. Nobody. Nothing. I never said I was poor. Never said I was passing through. You assumed those things. I just didn't correct you." He took a step forward. She stepped back. He stopped. "I needed to know." "Know what? If decent people still existed. If kindness was real, or just something folks performed when they wanted something back." His jaw worked. "If I wasn't crazy for still believing in it after everything Garrett did." Her hands were shaking. She pressed them against her skirt. "So you tested me? Like I was some kind of experiment?" "Yes." The honesty of it hit like a fist. No excuses, no apologies. Just yes. "You watched me struggle. Watched me talk about selling my mama's ring. You could have stopped it all with a word. One word. But you just watched. I know. You know," she laughed. It sounded broken even to her own ears. "That makes it all right then. You knowing? No, it don't make it right. Nothing makes it right." He pulled off his hat, turned it in his hands. "I used you. Used your kindness to prove something to myself. That's unforgivable." Part of Martha wanted to walk away. Tell him to leave and never come back. Go back to her cabin and her poverty and her $18 and figure it out alone the way she'd been doing for 3 years. But another part, a part she didn't want to listen to, remembered his hands fixing her gate at dawn. Remembered him sitting in the creek with a stubborn mule for 2 hours. Remembered the way he'd listened when she talked about Samuel and her folks and the babies that never came. Remembered him saying, "You ain't alone no more," like it was a vow. Which was real? The drifter or the cattle baron? Why? She asked it to the ground between them. "Why'd you do it?" "Because Garrett broke something in me." His voice went rough, raw, made me think everyone was lying. Everyone wanted something. Made me doubt every kind word, every smile, every person who claimed they cared. He stopped. Started again. "I needed to know if one person, just one, could be good without knowing what they'd get back, without knowing I had money to pay them." And she looked up, met his eyes. "Am I good enough for your test? You're the best person I've ever known." The words sat there between them and the watching crowd and the hot August sun. Martha turned away, looked at the courthouse, at Thornton standing on the steps with his hat crushed in his fists, at the clerk clutching $65 like it was redemption, at the banker pretending he hadn't heard a thing, everyone watching, waiting to see what the poor widow would do, how she'd react to being saved by charity from a rich man who'd been lying to her face for 2 weeks. Her chest hurt. The corset was too tight. She couldn't breathe right. She could refuse his help. Tell him the debt's paid, but she doesn't want anything more from him. Go back to her cabin free and clear and alone. The way she'd been, the way she knew how to be. But then what more years of scraping by? More silence. More waking alone and going to bed alone and sitting on that porch with nothing but memories and regrets. She closed her eyes, saw him on that first day soaked, exhausted, hat in his hands, asking permission for her porch. Saw him latching the gate behind himself, respecting boundaries even when he was desperate. Saw him at dawn, fixing her gate, testing every hinge, measuring twice. Saw him laughing about that Jenny. 2 hours in the creek waiting. Saw him on the porch, whittling and listening and not needing to fill silence with empty noise. Which was real? Maybe both. Maybe neither. Maybe what was real was 2 weeks of someone making her laugh when she'd forgotten how. Someone fixing things instead of breaking them. Someone staying when he could have left. She opened her eyes, turned back to him. He stood exactly where she'd left him, hat in hands, face open, vulnerable. Not the powerful rancher from the courthouse steps, just Silas, waiting to see if she'd forgive him or send him away forever. "You should have told me," she said. "I know. Should have trusted me. I know. You made me feel small, stupid, like I couldn't see what was right in front of my face." His face crumpled. "I'm sorry. I never meant. But you were right." The words cost something to say. She made herself say them anyway. "If I'd known you had money, I wouldn't have been myself. Would have performed. Tried to be what I thought you wanted instead of just being." He looked up, hope flickering behind his eyes. "That cornbread." She almost smiled. "Almost. That was mine to give, not because you deserved it, not because I thought you'd pay me back, because you were hungry, and I had food, that's all. That's everything." Martha walked toward him. Slow, each step deliberate. Let the whole town watch. She didn't care anymore. Stopped in front of him, close enough to see the scar through his eyebrow she'd never asked about, the gray threading his temples, the fear in his eyes that she'd turn away. "I ain't good," she said. "I'm proud, stubborn, hold grudges. I cried myself to sleep more nights than I can count because I was so lonely I couldn't stand my own company." She swallowed hard. "That ain't goodness. That's just surviving." "Martha." "But I'm tired," her voice steadied. "Tired of being alone. Tired of doing everything myself. Tired of pretending I don't need help." She looked him straight in the eye. "And I'm tired of not having someone to sit on the porch with while the sun goes down." His hand moved, stopped halfway, waiting for permission. She took it. His fingers closed around hers. Warm, solid, real. "Partners?" he asked. "Partners, equal split, 50-50. Even though I got more, especially because you got more, your money for my land and my knowing of it, even trade or nothing." A smile broke across his face. Small, genuine. "You drive a hard bargain." "Learned from Daddy." Behind them, someone in the crowd started clapping. Then another, then more. Martha's face heated, but she didn't let go of Silas's hand. They walked down the street together, past the general store where curtains twitched, past the bank, past the boarding house where faces watched from windows. At the edge of town, 2 horses waited tied to a rail, the dappled mare and the rangy gelding. "Figured you'd want to ride back instead of waiting for someone's wagon," Silas said. Martha looked at the mare. The horse turned, nuzzled her palm with a soft nose. She swung into the saddle. Leather creaked under her weight. The horse shifted, steady and sure. They rode out of town side by side. The courthouse bell rang behind them. 3 times, marking the hour, marking the end of something and the beginning of something else. They rode in silence. The road stretched ahead, dusty and familiar. Her cabin would come into view soon. Her land. Their land. The word still felt strange, but not wrong. Just new. "Silas Blackwood," she said. "Yes, ma'am." "That your real full name?" "It is." "Why'd you only give me Silas before—" "Blackwood's known. Didn't want you treating me different." She thought about that. "You got family back in Fort Worth." His jaw tightened. "Parents are dead. No siblings. Never married." He paused. "Nobody waiting for me." "What about your ranch?" 3,000 head don't run themselves. Got a good foreman, runs things fine without me. You just left." "I did. For how long?" He looked at her. "Long as it takes." "Long as what takes?" He didn't answer, just kept riding. They crested the hill. The cabin came into view. Small, weathered, home. Something in Martha's chest loosened. First time all day she could breathe without the corset feeling like it was crushing her ribs. They rode into the yard, dismounted. Silas took both horses to water them while Martha went inside. The cabin was exactly as she'd left it. Bed made, floor swept, coffee pot on the stove waiting, but it felt different somehow. Smaller, maybe. Or she felt bigger. Like she'd been holding herself tight for so long she'd forgotten what it was to expand. Through the window she watched Silas brush down the horses, methodical, thorough, taking care. He'd lied. Sort of. He'd tested her. Used her poverty to prove something to himself. But he'd also saved her land. Fought Thornton. Come back when he could have run. Which weighed more? She didn't know, but she knew she was tired of being alone. And whatever Silas Blackwood was liar, savior, partner, something she didn't have a name for yet. He was here. And she wanted him to stay. She opened the door. Called out, "You hungry?" He looked up, smiled. "I could eat. I'll put beans on." Normal words, familiar rhythm, but underneath, everything had shifted. They weren't strangers anymore, weren't guest and host, were something else. Something without a name. Martha set the pot on the stove, added wood, measured beans enough for 2, enough for 2, after 3 years of measuring for 1. This was, she didn't finish the thought, just stirred and waited for the water to boil. Outside, Silas finished with the horses, came up the steps, paused at the door. Permission to enter. She almost laughed. After everything, the courthouse, the confrontation, the partnership he was still asking. "It's your home too now. Partners. Remember." He stepped inside, looked around like seeing it for the first time. "Good cabin. Your daddy built well." He did. They stood in the small space. The air felt charged. "I should get my things," Silas said. "Set up in the barn once we build one. Till then, the porch is fine. Porch is fine for now." Silence. "Silas?" "Ma'am." "What happens now?" He came to stand beside her at the stove. Close enough she could smell store-bought soap. Not her lye soap anymore. Something expensive. "Now we build something," he said. "Together. You really want to stay here, this little patch of nothing? It ain't nothing." He looked at her. "It's everything I've been looking for." Her throat closed. She nodded. Couldn't speak. That night they sat on the porch as the sun set. Same as always. But different, because now Martha knew who he was, where he came from, what he'd given up to be here. But she still didn't know the most important thing. Why? Why would a man with everything walk away from it all? What was he really running from, or running toward? Silas was gone 3 days. Martha worked the garden, pulled weeds, protected tomatoes from the chickens that kept finding ways under the wire. The routine was the same, but everything felt different. The coffee pot on the stove she only made half now. The porch felt hollow without the sound of whittling. She caught herself listening for hoofbeats that didn't come. The first night she slept fine. The second night she lay awake, wondering if he'd changed his mind. If Fort Worth would remind him what he'd left behind, and he'd decide not to return. The third evening, when the sun started sinking, she sat in her rocker and realized her hands were shaking. Then hoofbeats. She straightened from the bean plants, hand shading her eyes against afternoon sun. Silas on his gelding, leading a pack horse loaded with supplies, flour sacks tied across the saddle, lumber lashed on top, tools hanging from the sides. He rode into the yard, dismounted, looked at her across the rows of vegetables. "Fire at the ranch back in Fort Worth," he said. His voice was flat, tired. "Lightning strike during a storm. Main barn went up. Lost 60 head before my foreman got the rest out. Nobody hurt, but—" He stopped, set his hat on the saddle horn. "Damage was considerable." Martha's hands stilled on the beans. "I'm sorry. Ain't your doing. Still, that's hard." He started unloading the pack horse, moved stiff, like his back hurt. "I sold it." The words didn't register at first. Martha climbed out of the garden, skirt dragging dirt. Sold what? The ranch, the whole operation, all 3,000 head, the buildings that didn't burn, the land, everything. Foreman wanted to buy it. Been wanting to for years. I gave him terms he could manage. Signed papers yesterday. Martha's throat went dry. "You sold your ranch?" "I did." "Why?" He tied off the pack horse, turned to face her. "Because I don't want it anymore. Too big. Too much politics and maneuvering and people wanting favors." He gestured at her cabin, her garden, the fence line. "I want to build something different, smaller, better, here, if you'll have me." "Have you how?" "As a partner, equal. Your 160 acres combined with the quarter section north, I can purchase 320 acres total. Build a model ranch. Prove cattle and crops can work together without destroying the land. Rotational grazing so the grass recovers. Windbreak trees. Fair wages for hired hands." He was talking faster now. "Your cabin stays, maybe use it for a guest house later. Build a new main house. But your folks' graves stay exactly where they are. Wouldn't touch them." Martha couldn't find words. Her tongue had gone thick. "I ain't asking for charity," he said. "I'm asking for partnership. What you know about this land for what I know about cattle and capital. Even trade." "Ain't even," her voice came out hoarse. "You're putting in money. I'm putting in what thin soil and a broke-down cabin. You're putting in 3 years of keeping this place alive alone. You're putting in knowing when to plant by the moon, how to stretch $18 across 3 months, how to make flour sacks into dresses and raise chickens that actually lay. He took a step closer. That knowledge is worth more than money. Money I got. This, he tapped his temple. This I need to learn. The sun was sinking. Gold light slanted across the yard, made the dust motes visible like they were suspended in honey. We'd be partners, Martha said slowly. True partners, not you helping me out of pity. Never pity. His eyes were steady. Respect. She looked at him. At this man who'd walked away from an empire to stand in her dusty yard, making promises about equal partnership, looking for the lie. The catch. Found nothing but steady eyes and hands that knew how to build things. All right, she whispered. All right. His shoulders dropped like he'd been holding them tight for days. Thank you. They unloaded the supplies. Flour, salt pork, cornmeal that wasn't stretched thin with water, real coffee beans, Tool's new hammer, saw with sharp teeth, coils of wire. It took 3 trips to get everything inside and stored. By the time they finished, the sun was touching the horizon. They didn't sit in the rockers that evening. Instead, they climbed down into the yard. Silas found 2 sticks and started drawing lines in the dirt. Creek runs here. He traced it out. We fence here in spring, keep cattle off so the grass can recover. Plant cottonwoods along here for windbreak. They grow fast, hold the soil. Martha knelt beside him. Took her own stick. Sorghum in the low section. It catches moisture better than wheat. How many acres you think? 10, maybe 15 if we're ambitious. Cattle, Silas said. Start with 50 head. Herefords. They handle drought better than longhorns. We'd need hands to manage that many. Hire 3 to start. Pay them $30 a month plus room and board. Martha whistled soft. That's high wages. That's fair wages. Fair wages mean men stick around. Do good work instead of just enough to get by. She couldn't argue with that. They kept planning. The dirt became covered with lines and scratches, a map of something that didn't exist yet, but could. The moon climbed. Stars came out hard and bright. Martha's knees ached from kneeling, but she didn't want to stop. House, she said finally. Can't fit hired hands in this cabin. Where would you want it? She pointed to the rise east of the current cabin. There, can see the whole property, catches the evening breeze. Good spot. He drew a square. Your folks' graves, stay where they are. Course. Martha's throat went tight. She nodded, unable to speak. They planned through the night, drew and talked and erased lines with their palms and drew again. Martha's voice went hoarse. Silas's eyes were red from dust and lack of sleep, but neither wanted to quit. Because this wasn't just planning. This was building. Taking broken pieces and making something new. When gray light started bleeding into the eastern sky, Martha sat back on her heels, looked at the dirt covered in their marks. Crude and simple, but it was theirs. We should walk it, she said. The whole property line. See it real. Now, why not? They stood, brushed dirt off their knees, walked east to where her fence met the road. The wire Silas had mended 3 weeks ago still held true. They followed it north, past the garden, past the cabin, to where her land ended. This'll be ours too, Silas said. The quarter section adjoining. Once paper's clear. Martha looked out over grass turned gold by early light. Come spring it would green up, feed cattle, grow. It's good land, she said. Hard, but good. Best kind. They kept walking. The sun climbed slow, turned the sky from gray to pink to blue. Their shadows stretched long beside each other on the ground. Martha stopped at her parents' graves. 2 simple stones marking the dirt. She knelt, touched her father's marker. The stone was cool under her palm. "Mama, Daddy." Her voice was quiet. "We're staying, building something new, and I ain't alone anymore." Behind her, Silas stood back, giving her space, respectful. Martha stood, turned. "Thank you for the land, for staying, for seeing me. Thank you for the cornbread." Something passed between them in the morning light. Understanding, recognition. They walked back toward the cabin, stopped halfway, looking out over what would become their shared future. Silas held out his hand. "Partners." Martha looked at it. Broad, scarred, the hand that had fixed her gate and mended her fence and held hers in the dark. She took it. Partners. They shook, firm, businesslike. But then her other hand moved without planning. Without thinking, covered their joined hands. Silas's free hand rose, covered hers. 4 hands. Clasped. Holding on. They stood like that as the sun climbed higher. Gold light spilling over everything. Neither moving. Neither speaking. Martha felt his pulse against her palm. Steady. Strong. Real. This wasn't romance. Not yet. Maybe never. Maybe something else entirely she didn't have words for. But it was beginning. She looked up, met his eyes, saw herself reflected there. Not poor Martha, not widow Martha, just Martha, whole, enough. "We're gonna build something good here," she said. "We are. Gonna be hard work. I know. Times we'll want to quit. Probably. But we don't quit. Partners see things through." His hand tightened around hers. "We see it through." The chickens were calling, hungry, needing to be fed. Normal morning sounds pulling them back to the everyday work of living. But they stood a moment longer. Hands joined, looking out over land that was theirs now. Both of theirs. Together. Finally, Martha smiled. Small, but real. "Breakfast. I could eat." They walked back to the cabin. Hands still joined. Not letting go quite yet. The dirt under their boots was solid. The fence stood straight. The gate swung true on its hinges. Inside. Martha started the fire Silas had laid the night before. He hauled water fresh. Cold from the creek. She made coffee from the good beans he'd brought. The smell filled the cabin. Rich and dark and alive. They ate cornmeal mush at the table. Not much, but enough. "Tomorrow we ride to town," Silas said. "File the partnership papers, order lumber, hire a surveyor for the new property line." Together. Together. After breakfast, Silas went to check the horses. Martha washed dishes in the basin. Through the window, she watched him work methodical, thorough, taking care of what needed caring for. Their things, their horses, their future. She dried the last plate, set it on the shelf, looked around the cabin her father built. Same walls, same floor, same everything, but different now, because she wasn't alone. Outside. Silas walked the fence line one more time, checking for weak spots, planning repairs. Martha untied her apron, hung it on the peg, stepped onto the porch. 2 rocking chairs waited. Between them sat the small table she'd placed there weeks ago. On it, the coffee pot. 2 cups. Not 1, 2. She sat, rocked once, twice. The rhythm was familiar, comforting as breath. Silas came back across the yard, climbed the steps, took the other rocker. They sat in the chairs that no longer had space between them. Rocked in rhythm. Watched their land, their shared land, spread out under the climbing sun. Martha reached over, found his hand on the armrest, covered it with hers. He turned his palm up, laced their fingers together. The future stretched ahead, uncertain, unknown, full of work and worry and risk, but also full of possibility. Martha looked out at the garden that would need tending, the fence that would need mending, the land that would need working, the partnership that would need building, all of it waiting, all of it possible. And beside her, a man who'd chosen to stay, who'd walked away from everything to build something new. With her. The prairie wind moved through the grass. The chickens scratched in the yard. The gate stood strong. And on the porch, 2 rockers creaked in rhythm. 2 people held hands. 2 futures became one. Everything was possible now. There's something quiet that settles after a story like this one. Not relief, exactly, but perhaps recognition. Martha and Silas both carried their losses differently, she in the rhythm of solitary work. He in the testing of strangers, but they both knew what it meant to sit alone with grief that couldn't be named aloud. Many of us know that weight. We've sat on porches while the world moved past. We've fixed things with our hands because talking about what was broken inside felt impossible. We've wondered if kindness still existed, or if we'd become too wounded to recognize it when it appeared. Some of us have been Martha, giving from emptiness because it was all we knew how to do. Some of us have been Silas, hiding behind walls because trust felt too dangerous after being betrayed. The thing is, stories like this don't need to teach us anything. They're allowed to just sit with us for a while. The questions Martha faced, whether to trust, whether to accept help, whether partnership between 2 broken people could be real, those don't always have clear answers. And that's all right. We don't need to resolve everything. We don't need every ending tied neat. What matters is they chose each other, imperfect and scared, but choosing anyway. Thank you for staying with them, for sitting on that porch alongside 2 people learning what it means to stop being alone.